meat of the materials, I want to go over some introductions, some housekeeping items, and also go over the agenda. So I'm Lauren Hawker, and I'm a senior planner with Long Range Planning.
I'm Tricia Isom. I'm the housing manager and executive director of the Roseville Housing Authority.
And I'm Susanna Krell, housing analyst with the City of Roseville.
So before we get into anything else, I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the city's website. The web address is on this slide if you want to write it down if you're not already familiar with the Housing Element project website. But this is being recorded because there's a lot of material here and we want to make sure that people who weren't able to attend tonight or even you yourselves can go back and rewatch if there's something that you kind of missed and want to pick up on. So I wanted to make sure you knew that was available to you. So in terms of housekeeping, what we're going to ask you to do is use the chat to ask any questions. There'll be set points where we'll pause and Suzanne will be going through and letting us know if we've gotten any questions on that part and reading them out to us. What I would ask you not to do is use the chat to literally chat with each other because then the actual questions may get buried. To find the chat, if you're not familiar, if you either mouse or if you're on a device, put your finger down near the bottom part of the screen, you'll get like a menu bar will pop up. And one of the things you'll see on that is like a little text bubble icon. If you tap on that, the chat will open. So on that note, I think as we move forward, one of the things we were going to do is we're going to go ahead and as we're doing the presentation itself, we're going to turn our cameras off so that we're focused on the presentation. And then when we get to question parts, we're going to be turning our cameras back on so that you can see us responding to you and have that kind of interaction. So let's go ahead and swing into it. So first thing, the agenda, we're going to be going over a couple of things tonight. So one of the things is we heard from about a quarter of folks only said they understood the city's development processes, how those work, and how affordable housing works in Roseville. So that's one of the things we're going to go over tonight. I'm going to be talking about tonight how the city's development processes work, and Tricia will then be talking about how affordable housing gets built in Roseville and in other communities. And then we'll be talking about the housing element itself and the regional housing needs allocation, which is RHNA for short. And then I will be talking about the accommodation plan for RHNA, and then we'll talk about what comes next after that. So to get into it, on staying informed. So one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about was how to make sure you can find out about projects happening near you. So the city maintains a webpage called Development Activity Reporting. And honestly, the easiest way to find this webpage, and this is what it'll look like for you here, except without the red sort of explanatory text I've added. The easiest way to find this is actually just a simple Google search. You can go onto Google and type in Development Activity Reporting City of Roseville, and this is going to be your primary hit. Now, the other way is to go to the city's website, go to the city's planning division page, and then from the menu drop down on that page, you can select development activity reporting. So there are 4 primary reports you can find on this page. The first is the current project detail, and that's a PDF that lists every single active project application the city has. So if somebody's applied for something from the city, it's going to be on that list. The next is new submitted projects, and that's an automated report posted weekly, and it shows you just those projects that have been applied for in the past week, so you can see what's new. The last 2 are for building permits. One is a static map that's uploaded monthly showing the past month's activity. The other, though, is an interactive map. And so you can click on that and zoom around and get additional details. And I would recommend you check that out at some point because generally if you're driving around the city and you see like grading activity somewhere, if that's a residential project, you could go to that map and find out what's going on there. But for our purposes tonight, I'm going to focus on the current project detail report because that's how you get information about projects that aren't approved yet but are being proposed potentially near you. So when you pull up that report, it's going to be a long list of projects, but what I've done here is cut out just one so we can focus on that record and you can see sort of the important information you can get about the project from that record. So the top blue text up there on the left is the address of the project, very important. And then right underneath it, circled in red, is the project number. Now, the PL stands for planning. The 2 digits after it stand for the year it was applied for. So this project was applied for in 2020. And then there are 4 more digits that are unique code. Now, if you have that whole number, PL20-0148, if you call somebody in the city and are asking about that project and give them that project number, they will be much more readily able to look up the project and get you the information that you're looking for. The other thing that's on that detail is on the right-hand side, also circled in red, and that is the last name of the planner who's been assigned to the project. So that also gives you the option of calling up the city and asking to speak specifically to the planner who's been assigned. So these are 3 key pieces of information that you need when calling a city to find out about a project. They're the most helpful for you. But the other thing I want to show you, and what's going to happen is I'm going to stop sharing the presentation for a minute and start sharing the city's online permitting system. Because if you have this project number, what you can actually do, hang on one moment while I stop sharing and reshare the website. What you can actually do is go to this website. This is the city's online permitting services portal. There's a lot of stuff on here that you don't really need for these purposes. All you need is this search box right here. And if you put in that project number, which is already in here because I typed it in, but I'll retype it, PL20-0148, and hit enter and give it a moment, you're going to get this page and you're going to look for this bright red bubble here. Click for additional information. Click that and select attachments. And then scroll your way down. What you're going to see here is some documents that have been submitted on the application. You'll be able to see everything that's been submitted. And if they're blue, you can actually click on that. So if you click on this that says plans, second submittal, if you click and then go ahead and select open and give it a moment as it downloads, what it's going to open for you is the actual project plans that have been submitted for this project. So you can see the site plan and the grading plan and the utilities plan and elevations, meaning, you know, the image of what the building or buildings would look like if it was approved. So you can actually look and see what a project looks like on your own and look at those plan sets. And I think that's really important for you to know that you have the ability to access all of this information. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't call us to get additional details. Just I want to make sure you understand that this is available to you. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. One moment. All right. So that's how you can get some project information. Now, obviously, you can also call the planner to get all of this if navigating that's going to be challenging in some way. But I wanted to make sure you knew that you could do this on your own if you wanted to. So how does the process work? So I'm going to give you an overview of sort of the fundamentals and the main points, the main notification opportunity points for you during that process. So the boxes in blue are sort of the key places where information about the project gets distributed or becomes available to you in some way. So the first thing is when somebody submits an application to the city, they're applying for what's called an entitlement. And that's different from a permit, and that's important. A permit is issued if you meet the standards, which are usually quantified and are focused on health and safety and codes. So think a building permit. An entitlement involves more discretion, and depending on the entitlement, gets into the intended use, the design, and comparison to more qualitative standards, like something called the city's community design guidelines. Important for you, an entitlement also involves an opportunity for public review and comment. So the submitted application should include some application forms and plans like the ones I showed you, showing what they intend to do. If the application is complete, it gets distributed electronically to all of the city's departments, as well as some external reviewers for review. It's at this early point that you have your first opportunity to find out about a project, either on the city's website, like I just showed you, or alternatively, you can be checking the Roseville Coalition of Neighborhood Associations website because all new project notifications are also posted there. Now, it's typical that a first application doesn't conform to different design standards or policies, so it usually gets revised at least once. Now, after the major revisions are done and the project is starting to look, more realistic, we'll schedule a neighborhood meeting if the project is within an existing neighborhood. This is another opportunity to find out about a project when the notices go out for that neighborhood meeting. Now, a project will typically go through 3 or 4 rounds of revision before it meets the city's standards and is ready to be scheduled for a public hearing, which again will involve public notification. Now, there are 3 hearing bodies if a project is going to a hearing body that a project could go to: the Design Review Committee, the Planning Commission, and City Council. The entitlement determines which hearing body or bodies the project goes to, but the hearing bodies all follow a set of City Council adopted hearing procedures. Basically, the hearing goes like this. Staff gives a presentation, the applicant has an opportunity to speak, then the public has an opportunity to speak, the applicant has an opportunity to respond, and then the public comment portion of the hearing is closed and the hearing body begins discussion. And the hearing body can ask questions of staff or of the applicant or of public speakers during that public comment period. So that's the brief overview. There are a lot of other details and nuances, but those are sort of the fundamentals. So let's talk about how to offer your input during those different points in this process. So when that application first gets distributed and you're finding out about it by looking on Arcona or looking on our website, your best point of contact is planning. You can either look up that report and call the city and ask specifically for that planner, or you just contact the planner on duty at the number on this screen or at the email on this screen. And you can let them know that you're interested in this project and you'd like additional information, and you can get connected with the folks you need to talk to. And you can talk to that planner who can explain to you the plans and what the project is and chat with you about what the process is going to be for that project, and also can take your initial comments. Now, at the neighborhood meeting, there are also a lot of different ways to provide input. The planner is usually there to facilitate or moderate the meeting, but ultimately this is really for the applicant to directly communicate with the neighborhood and vice versa. You can provide written comments ahead of time so that the applicant can be prepared to address your concerns at the meeting. You can speak at the meeting itself to ask questions or offer concerns, and the planner will be writing those down. Or you can provide written comments at the meeting itself. And if you know there are multiple folks that share similar concerns because you've been speaking with your neighbors, it's actually a good idea to coordinate with each other and nominate one of you as spokesperson. Or if you share multiple concerns, to assign one issue to each person. It tends to be more impactful and gets people's attention to have one person with a clear message representing X number of people than it is to hear the same thing many, many times. Even if you choose not to speak or make comments at the time, your attendance alone can be important, because if a lot of people show up to a neighborhood meeting, that fact alone tells the city something about how important the neighborhood thinks the project is. And everything I said about neighborhood meetings is true for the public hearings, but of course the hearing is more formal and structured. There are time limits for each speaker, including the applicant. The limits are there to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. However, if you're representing a group of people, you can actually request a longer speaking time. Also, if you're submitting written comments, you can send them to the planner, who will send them on to the hearing body, or you can also send them directly to the hearing body. I would also add one key detail. The city's municipal code contains the findings required to be made to approve each different entitlement, and it's the findings the hearing body will be looking to when making a decision. So whether you're in support or opposed, you should also be looking at those findings and making sure your comments address why you think the findings can be made if in support, or can't be made if you're opposed. The staff report published before the hearing will include those findings, or you can ask the planner in advance. Which brings me to my final point. You can always, always, always contact the planner, wherever the project is in the process. You can always email with comments, always call and get information. So that's my overview, and at this point we'll pause and I'll ask Suzanne if we have any questions submitted in the chat on what I've covered.
Lauren, I don't see any questions in the chat at this time.
Okay, great. So at that point then we will be moving on to talking about affordable housing, and Tricia will take it away.
Great, thank you. So yes, what is affordable housing? Affordable housing looks just like all the types of housing you see throughout Roseville. It could be apartments, townhouses, single-family homes, manufactured homes, or accessory dwelling units. What does it mean for a home to be affordable? An affordable home means a household doesn't pay more than 30% of their monthly income on housing costs, which includes utilities, taxes, and insurance as well. A household who pays over 30% of their income on rent and utilities is deemed cost burdened. The average 2-bedroom fair market rent in Roseville is $1,850. Renters in Roseville would need to earn at the minimum $74,000 a year to rent this 2-bedroom unit and have it be affordable to them. If we change our perspective and look at a low-income household, an average person working full-time, earning $15 per hour, grosses $31,200 a year. The rent and utilities for this household would need to be $780 or less to qualify their home as affordable. With over half of your income going to housing, there's little room left for emergencies, doctor's visits, or unexpected expenses. While rents and home prices continue to rise, incomes have stalled and affordable housing options are shrinking. Low to moderate income households are being pushed out of the community to find housing elsewhere. That means that entry-level professionals, retail workers, home health aides, restaurant staff, and childcare workers are typically priced out of our community. It's important for those who work in Roseville to be able to live here and be part of the fabric of our community. And another benefit of living close to where you work is that it helps cut down on regional traffic. Roseville has approximately 50,000 housing units spread throughout its 44 square miles. 34% of Roseville residents rent their home, and just over half of them are cost burdened. 66% of Roseville residents own their home, and about a quarter of them are cost burdened. If we put those two numbers together, approximately 1/3 of the households in Roseville pay more than 30% of their income toward housing costs. Housing affordability is a problem all over California, especially for renters. It's easy to see why this is a problem for our citizens and our communities across the state. Attending public outreach meetings like these can help you understand your community's needs and learn how other communities address them so that everyone from working families to retirees can have a place to call home. Let's talk a little bit more about the different income categories surrounding affordable housing. As you can see on this slide, the very low income category includes any household that earns less than 50% of the area median income, which for 2020 is $43,150 a year. And the gross housing costs would need to equal less than $1,079 per month in order to be considered affordable. The low income category includes any household that earns less than 80% of the area median income, and the gross housing costs would need to equal less than $1,726 per month. The higher income categories go up from there as shown on the slide. And when we discuss affordable units, those are the units that are in the very low and low income categories, which together we typically call lower income units. Next, we're going to discuss how these lower income units get built. The city does not build housing. Affordable housing development is a public-private partnership, often between a nonprofit or for-profit affordable housing developer and a local municipality or state government entity. The developer collaborates with the state and local levels of government to identify the greatest need in the community and to achieve public policy goals. There is a very efficient financing tool that is available to develop affordable rental housing, and it's called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, or LIHTC, as you'll hear us refer to it. This is a tax credit program created as part of the Tax Reform Act of 1986. It is currently the federal government's largest and most successful program for engaging the private sector in the construction and rehabilitation of affordable rental housing. According to the National Council of State Housing Agencies, approximately 90% of all affordable housing is financed using LIHTC. Over the last 33 years, the LIHTC program has financed more than 3 million affordable units, supported nearly 96,000 jobs annually, and benefited local economies from the addition of $3.5 billion in taxes and other revenues. Additionally, the estimated one-year local impact of building just 100 multifamily units in a typical tax credit development include $10.8 million in additional profits for businesses and wages for local workers, $4.2 million in additional taxes for federal, state, and local governments, and 113 additional jobs, about half of which are in the construction sector. Next, we're going to watch a short video explaining how the LIHTC program works. But before we do that, I want to finish up this section and just touch on the actual production of units. Depending on the complexity of a project, developers can spend anywhere from 1 to 3 years on what is referred to as the pre-development period. This is the period where the project design is approved and the financing of the construction begins. There are various funding sources from public and private entities necessary to finance each project. After the project begins construction, it can take anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years to complete, again, depending on the size of the project and any geographic challenges.
All right, and so let me unshare and reshare a moment.
Okay, and I'll just give it another quick intro. So Lauren's going to begin sharing this video to make sure that we can hear the audio. And then I'll ask your forgiveness for using a video created by the state of Michigan, but it is succinct and it gives a great overall explanation of the LIHTC program that also actually operates in California. California's version of this institution is the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, or TCAC. And if you're interested in finding out more about TCAC and LIHTC, you can visit their website at treasurer.ca.gov/CTCAC.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and then let me know if we have sound.
Yes.
This is the story of how the low income
Lauren, you're gonna
tax credit program, or some people call it LIHTC, changes this into affordable rental housing. Scooter is a nonprofit developer. He wants to turn the abandoned school down the street into apartments low-income families can afford. He's done his research, the financials work, his nonprofit can maintain the apartments, and there are plenty of people who work in the area that need affordable housing. Scooter meets with neighborhood residents and they think the project to revitalize the abandoned school is great. So Scooter picks out his development team and he's ready to go. Except he needs $750,000 to start the project. Where can he get that money? Scooter knows about the low-income housing tax credit. His project meets the program requirements, so he submits an application to the state government. In Michigan, the agency overseeing these tax credits is MIHTA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. MIHTA has a certain amount of tax credits to give out each year, and this year, one of the projects they choose is Scooters. MIHTA gives Scooter a non-refundable federal tax credit worth $1 million over 10 years. This sounds great, but Scooter's development company is a nonprofit. They pay nothing in federal taxes, and LIHTC is non-refundable, so even if the tax owed goes negative, Scooter's nonprofit won't get any money back. Meanwhile, over at Hometown Bank, Community Investment Officer Juanita is trying to find a way to improve the bank's CRA rating. Last year it was low, which means Hometown Bank did not invest enough in low to moderate income communities. Hometown Bank also pays a lot in taxes. Enter Scooter with his low-income housing project and tax credits. Juanita and Scooter make a deal. Hometown Bank will buy the $1 million tax credit for $750,000, and they will become a partner in the housing project for the next 15 years, sharing the risk. The bank can then use the tax credit to take $100,000 off their tax bill every year for the next 10 years, and because they're investing in a project to benefit low-income families, they will get a higher CRA rating. Scooter gets the $750,000 up front and is able to start turning the school into affordable apartments. The low-income housing tax credit is a win for both Scooter's nonprofit and Juanita's bank, and also for the construction workers Scooter will hire, the families that move into the apartments, and the neighbors who will live next to other people instead of an empty, unsafe building. Hooray! Those are the basics. You can find technical information and application guidelines for low-income housing tax credits at hud.gov or Michigan.
Okay, so hopefully that was a good explanation of the LIHTC program. Before we move on, I wanted to just check in with Suzanne again to see if we had any questions in the chat regarding affordable housing or how it's developed.
Yes, thank you for checking in. I don't see any new questions in the meeting chat.
Okay, then I will continue on. Let's see here. Next, we're going to go into the housing element overview. The housing element is an element of the general plan, which identifies the City of Roseville's fair share of the regional housing needs and establishes programs and policies to define how these needs will be met. Housing elements are typically updated on an 8-year cycle and must be reviewed and approved by the California Housing and Community Development Department to ensure they comply with state law. The current housing element covers the period from 2013 to 2021. We are currently working on the city's 6th cycle housing element, which will cover the period from 2021 to 2029. The housing element is a critical part of the city's efforts to preserve, improve, and develop housing accessible to everyone in our community. So what's covered in the housing element? We begin by conducting an assessment of the existing housing units. We look at demographics and socioeconomic and market data to understand what the community's housing issues are. This includes analysis of special needs groups that are identified by state law, and we describe our fair share of the regional housing need, which I'm going to review later on in this presentation. We conduct a detailed analysis of sites and review the realistic capacity for housing, including current pending projects, as well as vacant and underutilized sites that are zoned for residential development. Then we determine the capacity on those sites to accommodate new housing. We compare this capacity to our new housing targets determined by our Regional Council of Governments to determine whether or not we have enough properly zoned land to meet our assigned targets. Next, we do a constraints analysis, and we look at the potential governmental constraints, which could include permit processing procedures, fees, development standards, zoning restrictions, basically anything that could be seen as a potential barrier to housing production. Other non-governmental constraints are analyzed, including the availability of financing, land, and construction costs. There's a new requirement this cycle to conduct a fair housing analysis. This will include identifying any barriers to equal housing opportunities and the relationship between our housing sites and areas of high opportunity. Our goal is to ensure we continue to identify sites for the lower income housing throughout the city in order to continue the deconcentration of poverty. The city has done a commendable job on the deconcentration, and this slide shows this. I know it's kind of a large graphic for such a small slide, but hopefully you can see that we've been working to spread the affordable rental units throughout the city for the last 30 years. The red dots represent, those are in the lower right-hand corner, they represent the affordable units with agreements that have expired. Most of our older agreements were for a maximum of 30 years, so these 350 units no longer have affordable agreements and are no longer counted as part of our affordable housing stock. The green dots, which are mostly kind of all over in the middle, they represent the 1,969 affordable rental units which are currently available throughout the city. The blue dots represent the units that are obligated to be developed as affordable in the future and equal 1,840 units. This graphic shows all 4,158 lower income units that have and will continue to be spread throughout the city. So getting back to the housing element contents, I'll finish up with the last two bullets. Lastly, we conduct the evaluation of the current housing element implementation programs, and we look at what programs are working and where there may be any gaps. And this aids us in determining any new goals, policies, and implementation programs for the future. This policy document is based on meetings with our decision makers, as well as public input from the community through meetings like this, including the flash vote survey results that we've been receiving. So this is a very high level of the housing element contents. And again, just wanted to pause here real quick to see if there were any questions that had been written in the chat.
Nothing yet in the chat.
Okay, great. Then we will move on to Rena. So next we're going to move into the regional housing needs assessment. As was mentioned before, the housing element is the plan for meeting each jurisdiction's fair share of the regional housing need. This process starts at the state level, where the state of California Housing and Community Development calculates the overall future housing need for each region in the state to span the time frame of the housing element. The Regional Council of Governments within each region must then develop a methodology in order to distribute that overall regional housing need among all the cities and counties in their region. The Sacramento Area Council of Governments, otherwise known as SACOG, is Regional Council, the Regional Council of Government for the City of Roseville. As a region, SACOG was allocated 153,512 total housing units. Under SACOG's plan, the City of Roseville's Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, is 12,066 housing units. And that's in order for us to meet our fair share of the state's housing needs. The housing element must include an adequate sites inventory, which identifies the parcels in the city which will accommodate these units. State housing law does not require the city to construct the allocated units within the planning period, but it does require that the city maintain the required allocation at all times. The allocation from SACOG breaks the city's RHNA into income categories. The city prepared an existing adequate sites inventory to determine how many additional units would be needed to accommodate to comply with the new RHNA allocation. As shown in the table on this slide, the very low and low income categories have been combined into the lower income category and require zoning for 6,178 lower income units. As you can see, the city has a surplus of moderate and above moderate income housing capacity, but has insufficient lower income housing capacity to meet the RHNA allocation. The housing element must include new policies and programs to provide the necessary lower income housing capacity. Staff developed an extensive menu of options to address the 2,800 unit shortfall and to better prepare the city for future housing cycles, which Lauren is going to address next.
Lauren, you're muted.
I completely forgot to unmute. Sorry, everyone. So the first thing we're trying to do is to get as much credit for the units we already have on the books as possible to get our RHNA allocation. So we've got a deficit to start with. So as we talk to Housing and Community Development at the state, the first thing we're doing with them is talking to them about getting credit for what we already have planned, high density sites we already have planned. So the more we can get credit for that, the lower our deficit is. So that's step one. But we do know that we're still going to have some deficit. And so there are sort of two broad categories of strategies we're looking into to get additional units. Broadly, those are infill strategies and what we're calling developing area strategies. So infill strategies are focused on those areas of the community that are a little older, the houses were built a lot longer ago, and it's more focused on redevelopment and finding small infill sites, which are smaller properties surrounded by development already, whereas developing area strategies are focused more on the western side of the city where there are larger areas of undeveloped land. So in the infill strategies, two of the primary strategies we've been investigating, one is commercial corridors, and that's basically sort of like the city's downtown Roseville specific plan, but looking at Atlantic Street, Douglas Harding, and Douglas Sunrise, and looking at doing specific plans along those areas as well. And then the other strategy is to be looking at these older neighborhoods that are already have sites zoned and designated and even used for high density residential uses. But the thing is about those sites is because the houses were built usually long before zoning and land use came along, that zoning and land use reflects what's already on the ground rather than what makes sense for that site. And so we're looking at increasing the allowed density on those sites to more standard apartment densities because those are acting as a constraint on redevelopment and improving people's older properties. So in terms of developing area strategies, one strategy is a land use amendment policy that we're looking into. And what that would do is it would require landowners to increase the density of their existing vacant high density residential properties to 30 units per acre. And that would only apply if the property owner were coming to the city and asking for some kind of change in the allowed uses. For instance, if a developer wanted to move around their planned subdivision designs and roadways, they'd have a project with the city. And that's when we'd ask that it also include the change to their high density residential property. Another strategy in this category is conversion sites, which basically means identifying properties that aren't currently designated for residential uses and converting them to high density residential land. Now, there are a whole bunch of other strategies we've considered, like making it easier to get a second unit called an accessory dwelling unit, but the ones I've just discussed have the biggest potential to add units. I would encourage you to go to the city's Housing Element Update website because there's a very detailed memorandum listing all of the strategies we've thought of so far and sort of describing what those would be. What I want you to know is that these strategies aren't final by any means. This is what we've come up with at this point. And what we'd like folks to consider is whether you have any good ideas about how we can accommodate our RHNA number in a way that is fair and balanced for the community. We don't want only one part of the community to be tasked with taking on most of this challenge. There are a lot more details, like I said, on these strategies on the Housing Element website, so I would encourage you to go check that out if you haven't already. Now, this is a big hill to climb, getting 2,800 units. So it's a natural question to ask as jurisdictions across the state. It's not just the City of Roseville, it's jurisdictions all over the state this cycle are having some very difficult choices to face to accommodate these units. So we've heard this sentiment expressed. Well, so what happens if we just don't or we can't? So I think it's important to answer that question for you all. And the answer is that firstly, if the housing element isn't adopted on time, then we go from an 8-year cycle to a 4-year cycle. So we have to update it next in 4 years instead of 8 years from now. And then if the housing element isn't compliant, we don't adopt it, it doesn't include the capacity for all the units, then a jurisdiction can face fines of up to $100,000 per month initially, and then ultimately it can be 6 times that amount. Most critically, a jurisdiction can lose their land use authority over the housing element. The court can assign a receiver to develop a compliant element for HCD to approve. Of course, we have no intention of ending up on a path like that. We're hard at work to develop a timely and compliant housing element, but this is one reason why we all need to work in good faith together to come up with an achievable and balanced solution. So Trisha's going to go over what's next.
Yes, so public outreach and participation is a key component of the housing element update process. So we are so grateful for your attendance tonight, and we would like to continue to hear from you. There are multiple ways in which you can participate. You can sign up on the housing element website to receive an email notifying you of upcoming polls, future outreach meetings, public hearings, the publication of key documents, and project updates at roseville.ca.us/housing_element_update. For inquiries about accommodating the city's housing needs or housing element process, please contact the Housing Element Project Manager, Lauren Hawker, by email at lhawker@roseville.ca.us. For inquiries about affordable housing and the city's housing programs, you can contact me, Tricia Isom, at tisom@roseville.ca.us. Key project updates and milestones will be publicized on the city's Facebook page, Twitter feed, and Nextdoor. We have already begun using Flashvote to ask community questions about strategies and housing needs. You can sign up to participate in upcoming Flashvote polls if you go to flashvote.com/RSVL. Next week, we'll be holding 2 virtual community meetings. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments on the project, any questions you may have, your housing needs, any ideas to help us shape this housing element. Please feel free to send those questions to us ahead of time by email to ensure your questions are answered during these meetings. Again, you can use either Lauren's or my email addresses. The first community meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 27th at 6 p.m. and the second will be held on Thursday, October 29th at noon. You do not need to attend both meetings, only one.
And so what I want to say about that is that our intention here was for this workshop. We know there's a lot of information that we're providing to you tonight. So we wanted to focus this more on providing you all of that information, giving you a chance to ask us questions about some of that technical information, and give you an opportunity to sort of chew that over and consider all of that information so that when we hold the community meetings next week, maybe you're in a position where you feel like you've had an opportunity to think it over and you have some ideas and know a little bit more about what you might want to say. Because next week's meetings aren't going to be like this. It's not going to be a long presentation with information. It's going to be a short summary of probably those last 2 slides, just talking about this is the number we need, here are our strategies, and here are the consequences if we don't. And then it's all going to be focused on hearing from you, hearing your ideas, getting your comments, and getting your feedback. So we'd really love it if the folks who attended tonight, if you attend one of those meetings next week so that we can hear from you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the presentation at this point, so it's just us, and see if we have any questions right now or if there's anything else we need to address.
Thank you, Lauren. I don't see any questions in the meeting chat. I thought I saw a couple of hands and was able to share both your email and Trisha's email for questions, or of course the chat, but I'm not seeing anything else pop up.
Okay, well, if I want to give everybody a second to, okay. I do want to give everybody a moment to think that through. Is there anybody who wants to type anything into the chat right now? Because if not, then what we'll go ahead and do is close this, and thank you very much for your time. It is actually really important for folks to attend things like this and get engaged in things like this. I see somebody has a hand raised. To get engaged with things like this, because these kinds of bigger plans, long-range plans, they're harder for people to engage with than, say, the new development going in the corner right down the street from them. But they have a huge impact on future development in the city. So it's really, really important that folks get engaged in these bigger level planning processes. So I see that question.
Yes, Laura.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you've got this. Just wanted to best support you. So we do have a question in the chat. Marcia asks, are the housing projects being considered for retired seniors that are on fixed incomes from Social Security only?
Absolutely. Yes, I'll take this one. Thank you for the question. So again, you know, when we talk originally about affordable housing, the city does not plan, the city does not build the affordable housing. So when developers come in and want to build this type of housing, absolutely, we allow it and we work together with them to help finance it and all of that. But we don't actually have any zoning for senior housing. We do have a couple of senior housing projects that are being proposed right now, though, so that's very exciting. And one of them is 100% affordable. So it is exciting. But again, you know, we consider all of them that are proposed.
Can you hear me? I have a question.
Is this Olivia? Is it possible for you to type your question into the chat?
I can't find the chat. So
Okay.
I'll email you, but I can't find the chat on my tablet. So I will email you.
Okay, sounds good. I can check that right now.
I haven't emailed it yet, but I will.
Okay.
And Olivia, if you attend, let us know which meeting you plan to attend next week, and we'll make sure to address your question at that meeting when you send us the email. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, so is that it? Do we have anything else? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Is there anything, Trisha, you wanted to say?
I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight and taking some time out of your evening, and hopefully we get to chat with you next week. Looking forward to it.
Yes. All right, well, thank you, everyone, and I guess we will say good night now. You can go ahead and sign off, and we appreciate your attendance.
Thank you both.